Hello, everyone, and welcome to part 6 of the Vice Advice series. This week, we will covering the vice called frivolity, or frivolity. Maybe frivolity. Frivolity, you think? What would you say in front of a court? Frivolity. There we go. So that's.
I've never used such a term in a court.
Right. Okay. Frivolity. Anyway, that's, as you know, sometimes we do get into grammatical discussions as well, which are some of the side benefits of this Wednesday night live program, Global Class. And as I said, it's part 6. Followed the first 5 parts where we covered part 1, anger, then arrogance, then arrogance or vanity, then desire, covetousness, and then last week we covered envy and jealousy. And this week we moved to frivolity. In truth, that's only one piece of the vice we're going to cover, and as I've mentioned in the past, let me give you my sources, because it's really all fascinatingly originates from Kabbalistic sources, beginning from Reb Chaim Vital, the great Kabbalist and great student of the Holy Arizal, in his book Shari Kedusha, The Gates of Holiness, in the beginning, chapter 1, cited at the end of chapter 1 in Tanya. And the truth is, though we're doing an 8-part series, because we're breaking down the vices, they fall under 4 categories or 4 archetypes, which is the classic 4 elements or archetypes: fire, water, air, and earth. And fire covers anger and arrogance. Water covered desire, covetousness, and envy or jealousy. And now we begin with the 3rd archetype, which is the archetype of air, in Hebrew ruach, which covers, in the words of the Tanya, he actually uses 4 different vices that all are under this archetype called air. And he calls them hilulus, litzonis, hispirus, dvarim betelim. Let me translate that as best I can travel. Hilulus is where I got the word frivolity. Some people could say it can be silliness. It's essentially hilulus. Okay, we'll use those words. The next word is litzonis, can be mockery or scoffing, making fun, cynicism in a certain way. Number 3, hispirus, is boasting. And we'll talk about the difference between that and arrogance that I mentioned earlier. And finally, dvarim betelim means just idle talk, wasteful discussions that have no benefit and no purpose. So why do they all fit under the category of ruach, or called air? Because they're all airy, they're all empty. It's emptiness. You can say it's the inane and the asinine of our lives. Hey, I'm giving you words that you may want to use at some point, you know? Say, like the other party, they'll say, that's inane. And if you want to change words, you say, that's asinine. Hey, you see? There's benefits. The membership has benefits. Anyway, being a little... I hope I'm not scoffing or being mocking here. I hope this is not empty talk. But they all 4 go into the category of the so-called insignificant and unnecessary things that people do. And of course, the big question is, why do we spend so much time in things that have no real, our air? Empty, hollow. Vacuousness is a good word as well to fit in this whole carry of the vacuousness, which is like what air is about. And it's interesting in the order that the Alter Rebbe in Tanya, he began with the most passionate and the most fiery, so to speak, of vices, which was anger and vanity, arrogance. He moved to mayim, fire, water, which is also quite intense, because water is the source of all pleasures, desire, coveting, envy. And now he's moving to the 3rd category of vices, which is emptiness. Empty things, the things we do that are meaningless, are of no value, which you can understand is a completely different category. So when a person is angry, for example, or really arrogant, There's a lot of passion involved. There's a lot of energy involved. It's misplaced energy and it's misdirected energy. And we discussed, as we shall discuss now as well, then in those earlier parts, we discussed how you harness that energy. Because fire, like anything, fire can destroy, but fire can also warm. And without fire, without warmth, we don't have life. Same thing with water. Water is another very powerful force. Water can flood, can deluge, can destroy. But water, of course, is also the source of all our sustenance. So in that sense, fire and water are the two vices that are both have a lot of energy in them. The energy of fire is more the hot energy, water is more the cooler energy of desire and of coveting and of lust and those vices. And fire, the previous one, is more the fiery, the hot energy, which is anger, vanity, as we discussed as well. As I've mentioned a number of times, even though each of these 8 parts is self-contained, but it's obviously helpful to listen to the previous ones, and they're all online at meaningfullife.com in this series. You could check them out. Each part 1, part 2. Now we're in part 6. And we're moving, as I said, into the airier, the more empty and hollower vices, which don't have necessarily a lot of energy. On the contrary, they are more the vacuous. The vacuousness. What do you say a noun for vacuousness? It's another word for vacuity, I think. Vacuity. We're doing words here. Why not? Now, when you think of a vacuum is the exact opposite power than fire and water. Fire and water are aggressive energy, different sort. But vacuum is the exact opposite. It's empty energy. It's negative energy. So this is what we're going to address. And as I said, the 4 categories that the Tanya cites under this umbrella called frivolity or vacuousness is, I'll repeat it again, is frivolity, hoilulus, mockery or scoffing. Number 3 is boasting, bragging. And number 4 is empty, idle talk, dvarim b'teilim. Now, we're looking up the source, actually, in the Reb Chaim Vital. Interestingly, there's a lot of differences. Though he also, the Reb Chaim Vital, which is the source for the Tanya, there he begins that the main category is actually idle talk, empty talk. And then he goes into some of the breakdown. But here's not the place necessary to discuss why the Alter Rebbe chose to categorize it like that, like the way we're talking, which is in some way it's a little more structured than the Reb Chaim Vital, and why Reb Chaim Vital structures it a bit differently. But generally speaking, they are in the same league, which is the air. And thinking about it, it helps identify. There's a beautiful expression, beautiful, it's not so beautiful, but it's a very powerful expression. It says, Yedias hamachla chetzi refuah. Awareness of a problem is half the cure. I find for myself, and I see with others as well, and advising others, that when you can identify a problem, and in a way describe its parameters, describe its specifics, you begin to defang the enemy. Because most enemies are much more powerful when they're shrouded in darkness. You think about it think about psychological warfare. When you're fighting a war, even a physical war, a big part of it is counterintelligence and intelligence to hide your resources, to deceive and psychologically make the enemy think you're much stronger. So if you know your enemy, know thy enemy, as they say, you really were able to look at your enemy in the face, you have one thing going for you. You can then assess and say, I know it's an enemy, but I know what it is. But if you don't know and you just hear a lot of noise, and you can imagine maybe the enemy is a lot stronger and greater than it really is, which is a lot of the deception and the decoys and all the deceptive elements in real battles. So the same thing psychologically, and even more so. The enemies that plague us, the demons that plague us, that haunt us, are far smaller than we think they are. The reason they're so powerful is because they're shrouded in darkness. Take fear, for example. Fear. All of us experience some form of fear at some point in our lives. Now, when you start asking, what are you afraid of? Sometimes it's things are completely unknown. You just have a fear that you're just afraid of something new. You're afraid of failure. You're afraid of being judged. You're afraid of being looking bad, etc. But if you're able to define what you're exactly afraid of, and say, you know what, I'm afraid of this and this person, this and this situation. So then you can begin to get a handle on it It's like defanging the enemy by knowing what the enemy is about, which is, as you'll know, why so much intelligence is, as they say, is even more important than actually the power of military and the power of weapons. You know where your enemy is. You know where their stronghold is, where their weak points are. You know, they say, for example, Eli Cohen was a spy, an Israeli spy, who spied on Syria before the 6-Day War. So even though the 6-Day War was clearly a miracle, but Eli Cohen was a big factor in natural terms because he was undercover, rose in the ranks in the Syrian government, was trusted by everyone, and was able to give a very, very clear picture of the whole Golan Heights and the defense lines and the offensive lines of the Syrians. So when the 6-Day War came, that line was easily conquered. Now, sadly, they did catch him right before the war. I think in 1965, they caught him broadcasting and they hung him. It's a famous story, Eli Cohen, one of the great heroes of that time. But it just goes to show, just using one example among many, how intelligence is far more important than actually the war itself. Because you know where your enemy is. You know, here's the enemy, here the enemy is not. So you don't have to guess. That is a critical component. So psychologically, this is the same as true. One of the ways to really help others, it's harder to do it with yourself because we have our blind spots, and our blind spots always exaggerate a problem. Because you know, when you're in trouble, when you feel uncomfortable, you don't know whether it's a big thing or it's a small thing. So we usually tend to exaggerate. Not exaggerate intentionally because we're exaggerators or we're trying to be maliciously. It's just that when you're in pain, you're in pain. And when you find out, for example, that all it is a little splinter, and if you take it out, it's great news. But we always worry that it may be much worse than that. But especially when it comes to psychological issues, fears, inhibitions, the phobias, the different things that are resistances to different areas, it's always smaller than it really is. And as a matter of fact, this is a Talmud. I believe in Sukkah, the Talmud says that the Yetzer Hara, which is the evil inclination, what does it look like? How big is it? How strong is it? Now, we all know when we are in the throes of passion or temptation, when we're in the throes of a seduction and lusting something or desiring something, we all know it's extremely powerful. It's almost impossible to stop once you're in that whirlwind, or what do we call it, it's quicksand. What? Yeah, that completely consumes you. Now, even you at that moment may even know that it's much stronger than it looks. It feels much stronger than it really is, because you see, once the desire is fulfilled or time passes, you say, you know what? Was it really worth it? Not necessarily. But once it takes hold of you, it's like completely hypnotic. It's like anything; it just completely consumes you. And sometimes you're even aware that this may not be great and may have a lot of consequences, but you're just blinded. So what is that? So the Talmud asks the question, how big is the Yetzer Hara? What does this monster look like? Is it small? Is it big? And the Talmud has a very fascinating answer. It says it's all relative. That when the Mashiach comes in the future, when the Yetzer Hara will be exposed finally, instead of it being some invisible force inside of you, the wicked people who gave in, succumbed to the Yetzer Hara, are going to see it's a little anthill. It was a little thing. It was nothing big to overcome, but they were completely consumed by it. And the tzaddikim, the righteous people, who always made sure to keep it at bay or did not let that Yetzer Hara affect them, will see it's a big mountain. Which means that everybody was deceived. This one thought it wasn't such a big thing, and this one thought it was an unbelievable thing. I couldn't control myself. It's an interesting take. I mean, you could really analyze this. It's really not the point I want to make in this discussion, but it's a real analysis of how we see enemies. Again, I'm talking about psychological enemies. When it comes to physical enemies, there's a certain objective reality. But we know very well that wars have been won and lost, not based at all on real numbers or real firepower, but on psychological attitude. I mean, the Vietnam War is one of the classic studies that everyone knows. The Vietnam was not even a third world country. It was a bamboo economy. And here was the United States, the mightiest empire in history, with the greatest military, and they could not win the Vietnam War. And it was just dragging on to the point that Americans just said, that's it. Now, what was going on? It was going on very simple. Vietnam, no American soldier knew why they're fighting this war. So you could have all the power and all the weapons, but if you have no clue why you're fighting, and you also have no clue what are we going to win when we win? We're not looking to conquer the territory of Vietnam in order to have more air room, more elbow room to for let's say McDonald's or for IBM. Was not exactly the objective. It was the theoretical, ideological resistance to the Soviet Union and the domino effect that the Far East is undergoing under control of this. At some point, it became a cause that no one understood, no one valued, and most people didn't even know. Can you fight a war with all the weapons in the world and you wake up in the morning and you have no idea why you're fighting? Whereas the other side, the Vietnamese, this was their land. This was their territory. So they were fighting for their lives. Their passion was there. You can't destroy passion. Now, if the Americans had passion, they had passion, obviously it wouldn't have been a match. I'm just giving one point of it. The point that I'm trying to say is that when it comes to battles, there's far more going on than pure objective firepower. I have to always say this because this is a fascinating, humorous little anecdote. I remember in camp, we were campers. It's new summer camp, new summer. We went to camp that summer, new summer, new bunk and all that. I remember the first day, you meet your what do they call co-campers, what do they call them? I don't even know, it's so long ago. But anyway, right away the people you like, the people you don't like that much. There was this one little arrogant, I don't know, what do you call these arrogant little twerp? But he was like this intellectual, like you could see he was like a bookworm type. But he thought he was superior to everybody. He had that air about him as soon as he walked in. And then, of course, he lets us all know day one, as we're already unpacking, he's already telling us that he's a chess champion in his this. And, he's a great chess player and all that. I mean, so you can imagine nobody in the bunk really was very big fan, to put it mildly. And, of course, they made his life miserable in all different type of ways, as campers can do in a bunk, And then one of them said to me, I remember said, we got to put him in his place. And I had that, that little edge in me that I said, that's right. So I did a job on this guy. I remember first lunch or by dinner that night, I said to him, I hear you play chess. He says, yeah, I'm not just a play chess. I'm like, whatever, Gave me his title. So I said, I don't want to embarrass you, but I don't think I'd even play you. But we're not even in the same league. I just started working on him. I saw he was an immature kid, so I started working on him. And he said to me, "Why, you play?" I said, "Yeah, but I only play the top." And I think you're like more juvenile. You're like the junior leagues or something I kept on egging him on junior leagues, the minor leagues, whatever I called it. And we're talking about major league chess. She said, "No, I'll play you." I said, "I'm not going to play you." No way. First of all, I don't want to humiliate you, and I also play only for money. I did that. Now I played decent. Trust me, I'm no great chess player. But this guy, every day I worked on him, and he kept coming to me. I want to challenge you. And then he tells the other bunk guys, he says, the guy doesn't want to take a challenge. And I cynically just brushed him off and say, come on, you little kid here. Anyway, you can imagine a few weeks, or maybe the second week of then I said, okay, if you insist, I play you. And I'll play you without money for one time. And then the second game, after I beat you, then you could put down $100. Something like that. That's what I said. I don't even remember. Maybe we sit down, the whole bunk gathers. It was some afternoon. It was this big thing. He was so psyched up that I must be who knows how good. So he was reading it. So, of course, the first 10 moves, the first 8 moves, they're pretty conventional. But then, in the 7th or 8th move, I did a move. And he was reading everything into my moves with such depth. He looked, I remember him scratching his head. He says, I didn't see that. Is that Lopez versus this from 1845? I said, no, a little earlier than that. He says, earlier than 1845? I said, listen, the masters know things, Anyway, it was all BS, to be honest. And every move I made, and we had a time clock. He kept on, to this last second, because he's looking, he says, what are you trying to do with that? It didn't make sense. And I basically beat him around 15, 16 moves. Why? Because he completely misunderstood that I had no plan. He read into it. So he made all kinds of mistakes. Didn't even realize he was just trying to play me, not play the game, And I completely psyched him out. Until this day, he still doesn't know, unless he's listening to this, that I didn't know how to play as well as he did. Trust me. But I just give you one small example. But it's been a lesson to me. The truth is, I'm not really proud to tell this because it was childish thing, honestly. I had to put him in his place. God bless him. There's things. He was growing up. But that age, that's what we kids do, right? That's what we boys do. Boys will be boys. Right. Anyway, But what I did learn, and I learned a lesson from this, is I see this all the time. You meet people, they share with you problems. You try to, you try to assess it, and obviously it's always smaller in my eyes than it is in the person's eyes because, when you're subjective, you always see things bigger. That's how it is. Or you see things smaller, actually. One way or other, you're either overblowing it or underblowing it, if that's an expression. So it's a tremendous asset to know your enemy. Know thy enemy. To know, because when you know, you can assess it. It also takes away some of the psychological unknowns, as I mentioned, and the fears that come with that. And you can at least say, okay, this is the challenge. We've identified it. That's why you'll find a lot of very good business consultants or advisors in any field. Many times, after they assess the situation, they will tell you, I'm not going to give you an answer, but I'll tell you what your questions are. Because you don't even know what your questions are. You have to frame the question, like you have an organization and you want to have a good audit and see how things are going. You really want to know what questions to ask. Then you're already halfway to the answer. Like I said, knowing the problem is half the cure. A question is half the answer. A question of a wise person is half an answer. And very often, in half of our lives we spend and we don't even know what the question is. So don't underestimate finding out what your question is. This goes across the board. People who have, let's say, challenges in the area of finding a job, or challenges in shidduchim. Many people finding their soulmate, and they feel they've done everything. I've tried this, I've tried that. I don't really know why it's not working. Now, besides our own blind spots, we can't always say we really have tried everything because, you only tried maybe things that you're aware of. There's a lot of things you're not aware of. But there's also another element of not really, you don't even know what the question has to be posed. What is really the question? Is it you? What is it about you, let's say, that you're giving off, let's say, an energy, projecting something that maybe people pick up that is not committal? And who wants to marry someone that's not committal, etc.? I'm just used throughout an example. I don't mean necessarily that one. There's a lot of different culprits here, the usual suspects and the unusual suspects. But the point I'm making here is that the more you understand, and someone says, you know what, I can't tell you what your answer is, but I can tell you what your problem is. Or I'll tell you what the dilemma is, or the question, you're really halfway there. Truly halfway there. So when you can categorize these vices and say, you know what is the root of anger? What is the root of vanity? What is the root of desire? What is the root of coveting, covetousness? And what is the root of desire, of envy, jealousy? And now we're discussing what is the root of this airy, inane, and asinine, what I put it, vacuousness, frivolity, mockery, boasting, and empty, idle talk. When you get to the root of it, it becomes a very different thing. Then it's not about, okay, you know what? I'm a person that I can't control my anger, or I can't control my desires, or I can't control my arrogance, or I can't control my just wasting time and just doing things idle. That's the symptom. So by identifying the root of it, what you're doing is you're isolating the problem into, here it is, these are the roots, these are the causes, this is the driving forces. So you can do is attack not the symptoms, you can attack the root. Like I've mentioned, very often, most of our negative stuff in our personalities are often associated with insecurity. Across the board, almost all of them, somewhere you're going to find an insecurity. And you're compensating for the insecurity with whatever it is that you're using. Some use anger, called aggression, and some use passive-aggressive, and some use passive. There are already three different ways to deal with an uncomfortable situation. You're not knowing how to deal with it, you just burst out in anger. Others are passive-aggressive, which means, that it doesn't sound very strong, but through your passivity, you are being aggressive. And some people just retreat into silence. And you don't even hear from them. They just run away, they're afraid, so they just go undercover. All three are reactions to the same problem, just through the three different reactions. But they're all coming to a point, but you've been challenged, you've been threatened, I should say, and you're vulnerable and you feel insecure, so there's no way for you, so you lash out, or you withdraw, or something in between. The same as with other vices. They are all coming to compensate for something. In other words, we could say a secure, solid person driven by self-esteem and has that self-confidence and driving from within, yes, is going to have less vices. No question. Will they not have challenges? Everyone has challenges. But they'll have less vices. That's why we also say, for example, about addictions. Everyone knows, no one goes out to become an addict and says, hey, I want to become a drug addict. I want to become an alcoholic. I want to become a gambling addict. I want to become a sex addict. Who wants to become an addict? Nobody likes the idea that I'm controlled by something else, by a substance or by an experience or some type of action is controlling me. It's very humiliating to acknowledge that. But what the thing is, addiction is replacing and compensating something. You're looking for relief. You're looking for joy. You're looking for a high. So therefore, this thing is giving it to you. If it's unhealthy, too bad. So you become completely attached to it. So the addiction really is rooted in a deep hunger of a person looking for something, but they have not found it in a healthy way. So they're looking for it in an unhealthy way. Or whatever it is that satisfies that the moment and satisfies that need. So when you think of it that way, it becomes a lot easier, I should say, is to by identifying, you can then figure out what am I addressing and what should I be attacking. Another factor is we all know we need to allocate resources to something. If you have no clue what your enemy is like, what resources do you allocate? Do you need once a day, once a week, once a month, an hour a day? What resources? How much time? How much energy? You have an understanding a little better of what you're dealing with. So even if you've not conquered it, you at least what you can do is say, okay, these are the resources I need. Just like someone like a doctor will tell you, hey, you need to exercise once a day to rehab because you had an injury in your arm. You want to get your arm back to this. This is the regimen. Not every day necessarily. Not every hour. Once a day in the morning, 30 minutes. Do these and these exercises. Take these and these vitamins. That's called a healthy approach. There's a problem, diagnosis, and intervention. If you don't know what the problem is, obviously, and you don't have a diagnosis, what's the intervention? What should you do? So then you're basically left to the wolves. Whatever comes up, I get angry, or this happens, that happens. Okay, let me see what I can do about it. And you're also doing everything on the run and shooting from the hip, no strategy and no approach. So by identifying the roots, and I said not just the roots, but we go now to the archetype, that anger is a fire inside of you. And same with arrogance. Desires and coveting and jealousy is a water inside of you, is a water type of archetype feature. And now what we're talking about now, the frivolity and mockery and boasting and idle talk is an air part of you. You begin to understand, okay, so let me look at the vacuousness or that so-called empty part of me that is allowing me to be involved in things that really have no benefit. Now, with that said, so then you can look at all these four that I just described as being expressions of that type of emptiness. So then we ask the question, does it make sense? Is any intelligent person going to say, yes, it makes sense that I spend this today 3 hours doing nothing? Or 3 hours, I would say doing nothing, idling around, listening to some talk radio that frankly make no difference. Makes no difference in my life. It's not going to help me. It's not helping me make money. It's just, I enjoyed it. Shooting the breeze. Or mocking someone, or mocking something. Or frivolity, frivolousness. Hilulus. Just doing nothing, just a type of emptiness. And the fourth one was bragging, which again, bragging is also, how does it help when you brag? Other people may think good of you. And let me just say, it's not really a footnote. Some may wonder, isn't bragging and boasting similar to the vanity of of fire? The answer is, and this is explained by one of the Rebbes, he explains, vanity and arrogance is much more with substance, meaning you have something to be vain about. And you're arrogant about it. Here, bragging is that there's nothing to brag about and it's just empty. So someone bragging almost like it's a false brag, a false sense of boasting about something, where we make up things, or we just boast, or we exaggerate. So vanity is a expression of fire, because it's as we discussed then, it's a passionate sense of a inflated sense of yourself, but in an area that you are strong. Let's say you're an intellectual and you are a smart person, or you have other You made money, or you have other virtues, and you are very vain about them. Here, we're talking bragging and boasting about something you're not even good at. You're just making it like, you know what, I did this and I did that, and so on. So it fits into the air-like qualities of air, ruach, which is empty, another empty thing. So, like a balloon. Like a balloon is really, it's an inflated air and makes an imaginary there's something big going on here. Everyone's saying the Wizard of Oz, right? So when the wizard is finally discovered, Toto, right? He pulls open the curtain, and what does the wizard look like? A little man, an old man. Instead of this overblown Wizard of Oz with the fires and the tricks and the whole fireworks and the whole Oz. So of course, that movie is a very, I guess, harmless one, but it's an idea of how people inflate their image, and then you find out you have a little child that's just a little scared child, and just created this type of exaggerated. Puffery is a good word. That's an excellent word, because puff is connected to air. A lot of huff and puff. He huffs and puffs. More sizzle than steak. More smoke than fire. All the different analogies. But let's get to the root now of this emptiness. Because if you think about it, is anybody proud? Would you just be proud and say, you know what? Today was a very frivolous, mocking, boasting, idle talk day. Very few people are going to put up a sign, hey, this is what I did today. Very proudly. Why? Because it doesn't sound very complimentary. Even on Facebook, where people show all, or on other social media, we say, there's a lot of things we like to expose, some of our racy side of us, some of our little the little devil inside of us. Fine. But very few people are going to say, I was frivolous, mocking, and boasting, and so on. Because we all know it's empty stuff, and yet we're busy, we do a lot of it. Question is why? Why would an intelligent person do that? Now, this isn't a question of religion or faith or God even. You'll see people are extremely focused in business, for instance, don't have much time for idle talk. They're focused because their focus and their objective to reach a certain level of success or a certain financial goal forces them to be very focused and very cut out all the fat. They don't just hang around. As a matter of fact, you read some of the books of some of the the powerful and wealthy, they'll tell you, we know that most people do waste a lot of time, and that's what we take advantage of. Because when you really don't waste your time, you can get a lot done. So you have an advantage because most people really just want to hang out. Most people work, and then they come home, want to kick off my shoes, watch some television, have a barbecue, some beer, play a game, whatever it is. Most people are not necessarily that driven. So you'll see which is of course the minority will say, that's when you can take advantage because I am driven and I'm going to be more successful because of that. But the question is, why do they tend to gravitate to that type of, we call it vacuousness, I said before, inane, asinine. I like those words, so I'm repeating them, maybe too many times. Fine, one day when they'll edit this, we'll make sure that we get rid of the repetitions. But as long as it's a rough cut, I can just say it in different ways. How's that? Will you edit that out? I say this to the editors. One day when the fossil records will be discovered, from 2017, these videos, and they won't even know who I'm smiling to because the camera's here. They'll find, they'll be detective. He's an attorney, litigation, Upper West Side. How many are there like that? Thousands. I just gave it away. He has black hair, he's Caucasian, and drinks coffee. Tea. Sorry, tea. Okay. Yes. But you gave your voice. They'll detect it from the voice. And then here we have an accountant on the other end of the spectrum. I'm not going to describe you, okay? Anyway, getting back, I'm just having some fun here. For no particular purpose. I'm just demonstrating this is a little frivolity and a little, I don't say mocking, I'm not really mocking, idle. So the question is, why human beings, or where does it come from, such a thing? Even the animal kingdom, which is clearly inferior to the humans, meaning intellectually, we've conquered the animal kingdom, they're not conquered us, so clearly we are the superior species. But you don't see any animals wasting time. You ever see a few animals sitting down and just having some idle chatter for no purpose? They may get together to hunt, they may get together to plan, to breed, and so on. Okay, maybe we'll find some, there's a socializing element, yes. You see that in grooming, you see it in monkeys, you see it in cats, other species. But everything is more or less running toward some goal, toward a goal. It's we human beings that have this ability to do things that are empty and hollow, and someone will say, what was the purpose of this? And you'll say, you know something, there was no purpose. It was just to waste time, to buy time. Now, next week we're going to be talking more about slothfulness and really laziness as well as depression the next 2 weeks. So I'm not going to go there because that's another topic, but there's an overlap, and the overlap is this vacuum, this emptiness. And the answer from a Kabbalistic psychological perspective goes back to the Tzimtzum Arishan. You remember I've been using that as the root of all our problems. Why? Because the Tzimtzum Arishan is essentially the divine concealment of the purpose of existence from us. So therefore, before the Tzimtzum is a pre-Tzimtzum consciousness would be a consciousness that's completely consumed and completely aware of what is real. When you conceal that, and you create an environment where people can say, you know what, I'm on my own, I can do whatever I like. Who says there's a purpose to life? Who says there's a God? Who says there's anything? That independent consciousness, which is so vital for existence to be, because we need to exist, also has a side effect. And that side effect is that a vacuum is created. So the Tzimtzum, one of its elements, has a vacuum. We spoke about other consequences of the Tzimtzum in the previous 5 weeks. But I'm talking now especially the vacuum component. A certain vacuum, which means that an emptiness, and that's exactly the word used in the Eitz Chaim. Eitz Chaim is the classic work of Rabbi Chaim Vital I mentioned before, really of the Arizal, and he says, Cholol u'mokum panei, that when the divine removed or concealed his energy, it left a cholol, a space, a hole actually, and a mokum panei means an empty space. Empty space. Empty space means that seemingly nothing is there. And I say seemingly because it's not true. There is something there, but you don't know it. So in our own lives, the same is true. I'll use it. Let's just study in contrast here. If you were born, come out of your mother's womb, and there's a little box that comes with you and says, your mission, why your soul was sent to this world, is A, B, C, D, and you're aware of it, very big difference, because then you have a complete focus. God told you what your mission is. That's what you have to do. No different than an astronaut who goes into outer space, and let's say, think about the future, a journey not for a few weeks, a journey for a few years, right? And the astronaut knows here are his or her instructions, and they know here's what will happen in a few years. You have these science fiction stories, futuristic stories where there's even a next generation and a next generation. And of course, there's always that nightmare scenario, like with Hal in the 2001, where suddenly you lose sight of your objective. Then it gets dangerous, because the whole purpose is a mission. You're on a mission. And you cannot ever lose sight of that mission. But we human beings don't necessarily know we're on a mission. Why? Because we were born into a world that conceals from us and does not allow us to see it. So therefore, we live in a certain type of chol amokim pani, empty space, a certain vacuum. And that vacuum now we try to fill with activities of our lives. So what happens? Let's just take a scenario. Newborn child is born, beautiful, brings joy to their family. The child is, cuddled and nurtured and spoiled. And I'm talking about a healthy childhood. Let's take a normal, healthy childhood. As the child grows, it begins to become aware of itself, begins to have friends, sees itself as independent from its parents and its home, goes to school, early nursery school and all that. At some point, the child begins to start developing its own independent consciousness, to the point the child begins to study. And in most cases, I'll take a Western society, just a case study of a Western average child, goes to the lower schools, leads them to higher schools, to the better schools, so they can finally go to college, university, and find a career, whether it's a law degree, or it's accounting, or it's a professor, or it's physics, or science, or computers, etc., engineering. The list goes on. Physical sciences, social sciences, or political sciences. And hopefully this child finds its niche, finds its strengths, and is able to make a career out of it, make parnasa, make a livelihood. Then, of course, I'm giving a completely healthy version of this. The child then hopefully finds a soulmate, builds a family, a healthy, wholesome family, educates their children, a home that brings joy and brings light into this world, to guests and so on. I mean, what I just described is a very simple scenario. Nothing, I didn't discuss neurosis. I didn't discuss dysfunctionality or abuse. I discussed the best case scenario, and dedicated, not just dedicated to being good people, but also moral, ethical, helping make the world a better place, as the cliche goes. Fine. Now, has this person, this child, lived up to its potential, lived up to its fulfilling its mission? The answer is we don't know. Did it do any destruction? No, it's not. Everything's going well. But to say it lived up to its mission, for all you know, this child never even discovered what their mission is. They may have a good job, but it may not even be their greatest strength. It may be the opportunity that came their way, even if they're making a nice livelihood. So somewhere, because human beings have that angst, somewhere we start wondering, why am I here? What's the purpose of my life? Am I living up to that purpose? And of course, you throw into the equation the different challenges that life poses, that things don't always go well. There are losses, there are deaths, there's losing a job, there's losing a career, there's losing many different things. So these challenges often challenge and upset, so-called, the barrel, and then you have to review and rethink my life. And you start thinking, what is a meaningful life? What's my direction? Now, I'm describing specifically very generic because I don't want to get into one particular definition. So what do you think is happening here? There's going to be plenty room for a big vacuum here. Even in the best case scenario, as I said, even with good parents and a good infrastructure and a healthy home, there's going to be plenty time where we're going to feel empty. Why am I here? I don't feel driven. I don't feel happy. I don't feel fulfilled. And I don't necessarily feel that I'm experiencing transcendence. I feel I'm a survivor. I'm surviving. I'm making ends meet. I'm existing. I'm functioning. But I'm not transcending. I'm not reaching heights. I don't feel that excitement, the electricity of something that brings me to another dimension. Now, there are times we may experience it in love, in romance, in travel, in art, in music, which is why people have these diverse hobbies or interests, because that's what it does, or further education, adult education and other things like that. Obviously, things like money, sexuality are powers that are very, very key here because they often become forces that do give us a certain sense of like a sugar high, which may not last, but it's there. And then, of course, there are the vices, whether the addictions and the different things that are unhealthy that fill in some of these vacuums. But one thing is for sure, most of us do have potential, if not actual, empty space in our lives. When I say empty, there's a vacuum. I have noticed this often again and again. You see it in young people. I recently gave a talk. I mentioned this a while ago. I gave a talk to a group of teens at risk, they call them. They were actually young adults in their early 20s who had they'd been addicted and had drug problems and alcohol problems and other issues. And they were right now already in the detox state, rehab state. And listen to this. I knew one or two of them, and they said, why don't you come and let's have an informal conversation, which we did. So I asked them all this question. I said, how did you get yourself into trouble in the first place? No person on earth goes out, as I said, to become an addict. How did you get yourself into such how did you spiral out of control? So, it always begins with somewhere. So one person said, in my case, it was my parents were having a really ugly divorce, and it was so painful because I was being used by both sides. So I just numbed myself. I began to drink. First it was binge drinking, then I began to drink more. Then I tried other things. I was really self-medicating to numb and be a little, just not feel all this pain that was going on, and the psychic pain that I was having. Another person said I had bad friends, and everyone had something. This one had a death in their family. as we went around the room, everyone shared different things, but I said, but these are all really symptoms, because there are a lot of people who have, God forbid, a death in their family, and they may even have going through an ugly divorce or other challenges, and they don't necessarily become addicted or in trouble. So one person said something which, of course, I was waiting to hear that, said, I was just plain bored. I used to wake up, I really was bored. I was bored with school. I was bored with my friends. I was bored at home. And I was looking for some high, excitement. So, I started hanging around with these people, and they were very energetic. And we'd go racing, and we'd go to the beach, and we went skiing, and we went surfing. And, the one thing leads to the next. And some of them said, why don't you try this and try that? And everything became even, more exciting. And it all began because I was simply bored. And that was what I wanted to hear. Why? Because there are symptoms and there are causes. Most people will think boredom, what's so bad? Boredom? Listen, many of us are bored. How many times have you heard your children say, you're bored? So, so in Yiddish there's an expression, the grandmothers would say, you're bored. We'll supply you with a orchestra, as a joke. You're bored? Go find something to do. It doesn't sound like a very horrible challenge to be bored. But the truth is, boredom is a very innocuous, a very almost silent killer. Because boredom, what it does is it begins to erode your inner self. It's not a vice in the sense of a vice like anger or lust or something like... boredom is an emptiness. And a human being cannot be empty. They say nature abhors a vacuum, and I would say a human being abhors it even more. So at this moment you're bored, you may not feel its effects, but persistent boredom begins to erode, and there's this empty hole inside of you. This vacuous, holol umokimpone, a hole and an empty space that begins to beckon and demand to be filled. Vacuums are very powerful. And they're even more powerful than anyone can imagine. You know why? Because they're invisible. It's one thing someone says to you and wants to seduce you to do something. Someone is compelling you or giving you really strong reasons. So they're drawing you. It's like a magnet. But a vacuum is the exact opposite. Nothing's drawing you. It's just empty. It drains you. It's actually draining. The draining force creates so much energy, what we would call a black hole, which is maybe an example of the symptom in our physical reality. What's a black hole? No one's ever seen a black hole because the gravitational pull of this star is so powerful, it doesn't even allow light to escape. Imagine that. There are millions of stars out there. We see them because the light can get to us. But it also has gravitational pull. The sun has gravitational pull. You get too close to the sun, it will affect you. However, it's not that powerful that it does not let light escape. But imagine a black hole. So how do we know a black hole is there? Because we see its effect on surrounding bodies. If you see, let's say, some things are moving, even if you may not see the magnet, it may be behind the wall, but something's exerting power. The same thing is the vacuum within us. It doesn't have direct power, but its emptiness begins to suck. And as it sucks the blood out of you, drains you, it begins to create this tremendous tug that demands to be filled. The story is told when the Lubavitcher Rebbe had his heart attack, and he asked the doctor, he said to the doctor, what draws the blood from a syringe? What draws the blood? Is it the needle or the vacuum? And the doctor said it's the vacuum. So if you look at a needle, there's a needle. You stick the needle in, but you see then the doctor pulls. It's the vacuum that draws the blood out. So the needle is the so-called vehicle to actually where it's drawn through. But it's the vacuum that draws. And the Rebbe said then that the vacuum in people's lives, sometimes when they're down, when there's a setback, when there's an emptiness, an empty chair, it's an opportunity to draw even more power. So the vacuum of our lives is what allows us to become frivolous and idle chatter and mocking, sitting around, making litzonis, which is essentially, Meshav Leitzim is an expression in the Talmud. Don't sit around those that just sit and mock. We're not talking about intelligent humor that has a purpose. We're talking about sitting around and just laughing at others, which is something we all often succumb to. And the third thing was this boasting. So all these four, even though they're four different forms of expression, but they all go into one category. Ear-like emptiness. You used the good word before. Puffy. A lot of puffery. Huh? Puffery. A lot of huff and puff, a lot of air, but with nothing there to show for it. A lot of sizzle without steak. You ever go sometimes to these comedy clubs, or you can watch it on television, it can get you laughing and in stitches, but then at some point you say to yourself, to what end? What is all this leading me to? Now, I'm not saying all laughter is, laughter is a medicine on its own. It's good to laugh. But sometimes laughter, especially at the expense of others, and laughter at expense even of yourself, where really it's not leading, it's not teaching you anything. There's a lot of empty. I don't listen much to talk radio, but sometimes I drive and I just want to hear what others are hearing. I start moving the channels. They talk and talk for hours on end. And I'm not criticizing. I'm not even mocking. But I say to myself, what are we talking about? They talk sports radio. Okay, so sports, fine. People are passionate about sports. I'm not going to say it's completely valueless. It's mostly valueless because it really doesn't matter which team wins because it's not life and death, and it's not going to make you change anything in your life. But it's entertaining, fine. It's entertaining. It's a drive. It's like the Coliseum. I'm a fan. It definitely fills a vacuum in our lives to some extent. But then it gets out of control. Then it's not just the talk radio, even though the sport is not yet in season, so it's preseason or postseason. Now the trading season. And they keep you busy all year round, speculating who's going to be on the team and what will happen to the team and so on. Now I understand those that are completely consumed with that, but I have to say to myself sometimes, does it have a life? Is there a life outside of sports or outside of soap operas? I know this may not be popular what I'm saying here because as many people as watching me, a lot more are watching that. Okay, fine. So I have severe competition. What can I say? I used to have a radio show. It was called Toward a Meaningful Life, the show for skeptics and seekers. It was on Sunday night from 6 to 7 p.m. It went from 1999 till 2002. And we'd say, it was very interesting. It was a call-in live show on WEVD. And it was, I did topics that were really like people, like when home doesn't feel like home, or how do you honor parents who don't seem to deserve honor. I did police brutality. I did drugs. I did a lot of interesting topics. And the phones used to be off the hook. It was really good. Yeah, however, at some point, WVD was sold to ESPN. And I wasn't willing to do sports radio, so that was that. But I remember sometimes Sunday was the Super Bowl. My show was 6 to 7 p.m. Now, when does the Super Bowl begin? 6:25, something like that, right? Eastern time. So I didn't want to stop the show because of the Super Bowl. So I always opened those shows. I said, I want to tell you that I gave notice to the NFL that I will not take away any of their listeners and viewers of the Super Bowl. That was always my opening joke regarding that. Now, I'm not here to compare notes. I grew up in an environment where there's a lot, people who had purpose in their lives and meaning. And though I cannot tell you I have not enjoyed a Super Bowl or two, but as you get older, also it becomes less. At the end of the day, it really makes no difference. When the game is over, what happens? The only thing you have left is that you're going to talk about it with your friends the next day. That's left, and then that ends, and then comes the next show. You ever saw that? What was that movie with? Oh, come on. The whole movie is that, you know the name, a child, he's on TV all the time. They watch him all the time until he finally discovers that his whole life is a fabrication.
Truman Show?
Yeah, The Truman Show. The Truman Show. So the last scene is the best last scene. These two truckers, and the whole world is watching everything about him because the whole thing is fabricated. His whole life is fabricated. You've seen it. It's a very good movie. At the end, you haven't?
No, but I know what you're referring to.
Yeah, but the last scene is the best one. These two truckers who've been addicted to the show now for how many years? 30 years or whatever, 20 years of this guy's life. And then it goes blank because he finally escapes. He discovers the whole thing is this. So they're watching and suddenly the screen goes bzzz, and this is the last scene. And one of them, they're both eating something, like some big fat hero sandwich and like watching, like that. And old ladies are watching, everybody's watching, and one trucker says to that, hey, okay, what else is on? That's how it ends. What else is on TV? So I try to avoid really being cynical, but I can't avoid it because it's part of this topic. But that's what people we gravitate to. We can gravitate to become couch potatoes and be involved with idle stuff, the vacuousness, the inane, the asinine, for the third time. Yeah. And it's coming from our own chol l'mokim pani. It's coming from our own, rooted in the tzimtzum, from our own empty lives, because we don't have something to fill it with. So what happens? The vacuum creates vacuum, meaning it creates vacuous activity, things that don't have much value. And as long as everybody else is doing it, you don't even notice, because it's like, what do you mean? It's common. Millions of people are following the soap opera. Millions of people are living vicariously through other characters. That's the world in which we live. TV, internet, and we're projecting, and we see other people fight battles, and we think because we support them or we're against them, we're also fighting battles. And very often it takes us away from the real challenges of real life. So in a way it's a blessing, because our grandparents didn't have this luxury. They were dealing with a Holocaust. They were dealing with a World War II. They were dealing with real life and death. That was not a movie and not a film. So we have that luxury where we don't have real battles. So our battles are basically projected battles, these illusions. But it creates a very empty life. It's an empty life. And I watch it because I've been around, I keep watching, and I say, look at this emptiness. And people are not empty people. That's the thing, this tragedy. If a person was an empty person, is living an empty life, okay, fine. That's what he deserves. But what happens if you're not an empty person? You have a soul beating inside of you. You have a heart. You have love to give. You have love to receive. You have something to accomplish in this world that only you can accomplish. And you only have one life to do it. And you only have a limited amount of time. I say this almost with my own embarrassment. Sometimes I avoid, but imagine if I was able to list, if you were able to list how much time you wasted today, whether it's on video games, whether it's on frivolous texting, whether it's on a bunch of other things, it'd be quite embarrassing. We waste a lot of time. Yes, we can find excuses. I needed to do that. I have a client to answer to this one, answer that one. Trust me, I have these excuses too. Now, I'm not suggesting we can suddenly turn this around and let's not have any more empty space in our lives. That's not going to happen overnight. What I am suggesting is that vacuum does not need to lead to more vacuum. Vacuum does not need to lead to vacuous ruach, air-like behavior. A vacuum can lead you also to recognizing, I have a vacuum, maybe I should fill it with something really meaningful. Maybe tomorrow morning I should get up and go visit a home for children that are needy or are not well, and maybe take a walk with a Down syndrome child in the park for a half hour. That's not a vacuous behavior. That's going to make that child smile, and guaranteed it'll make you smile even more than the child. So that's how we have to look at our vacuums. Instead of feeding them with more vacuum by saying, okay, more emptiness, this is how we shift things. And again, I suggest this in small steps, not suddenly change everything. It's not going to work that way. You're still going to go to work. You're still going to go to the water, what do they call it? The water cooler? There's still such a thing in offices? Okay, good. I don't know. Yeah, I think so. Still going to have the idle chatter and some of the other stuff we do that's pretty airy, puffery. That's pretty puffery. Is that a word, actually? What does it mean? I mean, I know what puff means. It's like, puffery is like a collective puffing. A lot of puffery. Yeah. How would it be used? What kind of sentence would you use? Anyway, you'll come up. You'll tell me. The idea is clear. I got it. It's like there's a cafeteria where we drink cafe. A puffery is a place where you do puffing. Would that be right? Okay, I thought there was. You can smile, Moshe. I'm just making a little fun here. So bottom line is this. So the vacuum, air is the vacuum. Fire and water we discussed. Those are forces. Here we're talking about air now. And it's those Helulus, Litzonis, Hispirus, and Dorim Betalim. All four things I said in Hebrew now, but I'll say again, it's the frivolity, the mocking, the scoffing, just, empty humor, especially about others. Even though that's not boasting, empty boasting, just, I shot a lion on Fifth Avenue or something. And finally, idle talk. All are feeding a vacuum of existence detached from its source, but you don't have to see it that way. It should be the exact opposite. It should be as Jonathan told King David when they said, Saul wanted to kill him, he said, tomorrow will be Mockery Chodesh, the new moon. David said to Jonathan, he says, and your seat will be empty. David's seat will be empty because he had to run or escape from the wrath of King Saul. He says, "V'nifkadata ki yipoked meishavecha." And you will be remembered because, Jonathan is saying, you will be remembered because your seat was empty. So emptiness can lead to more emptiness. Oh, it's empty. Why not be more empty? Or it can lead to a surge, a hunger, a thirst to fill the vacuum with something meaningful. That's the way we have to think about it. So that emptiness, you have some free time. Why don't you do something purposeful and meaningful? It may initially may seem to be a little difficult, but at the end you'll have far more pleasure and far more satisfaction and contentment. So whether it's any one of these four things, a person in a frivolous type of mood, or a person who's in the sense of just making fun of things, mocking, instead of thinking or boasting or just idle chatter, instead of doing that, which really is reflective of your own emptiness, to do something that has a drive towards something. The vacuum should be a force for growth. It's like an emptiness that should be so empty, it should cause you to really want to fill it up with something very purposeful and meaningful. So there you have the third of the four archetypes, and its midas rois, the negative faculties or emotions or attributes that are derived from it. But you also have the ability to transform it, and transform it within from itself. The emptiness should lead to a strong force, a strong drawing of something higher and greater, which is exactly what the tzimtzum is meant to be. It's dark, it's a black hole, it's a hole and it's an empty space, but in it lies tremendous power. Because to create such an empty space, the divine had to exert much more energy than to emanate light. It's like a wise person to be silent takes a lot more energy than for a wise person to speak. So the silence, the emptiness, can sometimes be really inverted, powerful, positive energy. Not just sometimes, I would say always. So there you have the part 6 of the Vice series, called Frivolity or Vacuousness, whatever word we want to use for it, and with the goal, of course, to transform it into something positive. We're now just entered to the month of Nisan, which is this new month. 2 weeks, a little less than 2 weeks will be Passover, which is, of course, the time of our redemption, and redemption is something that's perpetual. So may we all have a very redeeming month and redeeming holiday. There will be another class next Wednesday, which will be the last class before Passover, and we'll continue this series, but also share some Passover words for the Seder. So everyone be well. It's been an honor and pleasure. And stay in touch by either sharing, liking, communicating with us. If you have questions, comments, please, we welcome them, and we're actually excited to hear from you. Everyone be well.